Good morning and welcome to our kitchen. This morning we're going to do a recipe showing you how to do strawberry jam. My name is Mandel Smith and I work with Penn State Extension. I'm an educator in food, families, and health, and also in food safety and quality. Part of my responsibilities in Montgomery County are to teach people how to do home food preservation. So today we're going to do just that. We're going to do strawberry jam. I hope everybody loves strawberry jam as much as I do, but this is a great recipe. If you're new to canning, this is a great way to learn how to start canning. So let's get started by getting all of our ingredients together for the recipe. So the first thing we're going to prepare are the strawberries. So I have, the recipe calls for 5 cups of strawberries. So I have 4 cups already in the pot starting to warm up, and we are going to prepare the last cup to get that into the pot. So the first thing, you want to make sure that you've washed your strawberries well, and we're going to take the stem and the crown off of the strawberry. So we're just going to quickly do that and just remove all of the stems and the leaves. And then after that, we are going to cut the strawberries up just a little bit, and just going to cut them into quarters and just a little bit lower. I'm going to turn this down a little bit. Okay, so, and I've got a few more here. Now, when you're looking for strawberries for this recipe, you want to make sure that you're picking really nicely ripened strawberries. You don't want to pick any strawberries that are old or moldy or anything like that, because the jamming process won't improve your fruit. You have to start with great fruit to begin with. So I tried to find the best strawberries that I could find, nice and red and juicy, right at the peak of quality. You don't want strawberries, like I said, that are too old or starting to lose their freshness. So grab the freshest strawberries that you can. If you can pick your strawberries or your fruit that you're going to jam and prepare it that same day, that's the best way to do it. But, you just want to get what you can from either your local market, your own garden. It's just fine. So we've got maybe about a cup there. We're going to add it to my bowl here. Let's just move that here. And then once we add the strawberries to the bowl, we're going to crush them. So some of them are already crushed here in the bowl. We're going to crush the ones that I just added. So let me move this out of the way really quickly. Now, the recipe says to crush the strawberries. You can crush them with a potato masher. If you don't have a potato masher, you can just use a jar or a measuring cup, whatever you can. You just want to just gently mash the strawberries. You don't want to pulverize the strawberries. You don't want to make juice. You just want to crush the strawberries. And if you like a really chunky jam, you don't crush it as much. But if you're like me, you like a nice smooth jam, you give it a good crush. So these strawberries look like they're almost just about right. I'm going to crush these over here. I have a few pieces that are still a little bit large for my taste. Okay, so there we go. That looks pretty good. Let's measure these out to see how many. If we have about a cup, I think we have plenty here. Okay, so a little bit chunks. So I have some nice, really crushed strawberries and a few little chunkier ones. And that's about a cup. That's great. So we're going to add this to the pot. And I have strawberries in the pot that are already warming. Okay. Good to go out. Thanks, Nicole. Okay, so I'm going to move this out of the way. So we have 5 cups of strawberries. The recipe calls for 5 cups of strawberries and 7 cups of sugar. So let's go next to get the sugar measured. So I have 6 cups of sugar. already measured. And let's add 1 more cup to this. And we're going to put this in the jar. In the pot with the strawberries. So when you're measuring out your sugar, it's over here, so you can see me. Make sure spoon the sugar into your dry measuring cup. You want to have it just a little bit, like kind of heaping. And then you're going to use the back edge of a knife or a straight edge and just take that across to make sure you have exactly 1 cup of sugar. So we're going to add that to the bowl. So that's our 7 cups of sugar. So what we're going to do next is we're going to add the pectin, sure, to the strawberries. Okay. And we're using powdered pectin today, and I'll talk a little bit about that as we go on. So once we have the pectin added, we're going to bring this up to a boil. And once it comes back to a boil, which will be pretty quickly, there we go. We're going to add the 7 cups of sugar all at once. I know that seems like a lot of sugar, but you need that sugar to get a good, safe product. So you don't want to cut back on the sugar. And I'll talk a little bit about that as we go along. So we've added the 7 cups, and we're going to stir this in really well. So we have in here 7 cups of sugar, 5 cups of strawberries. And to that, we're going to add 1 teaspoon of margarine. You can use butter if you like, but I'm going to use margarine today. Okay, and we'll talk about why I added that margarine once we get this all incorporated. That margarine is really important to, well, it's a personal preference. If you want to add the margarine, that works really well to help prevent so much foam. And we'll talk about the foam after we get this up to a boil, and you'll see what I'm talking about. But that margarine helps to prevent having like a ton of foam in your pot. Some people don't really mind having that foam, but if you want a nice clear product, you don't want to have as much foam. Okay, so I'm going to get this to come back up to a boil. I'm going to keep stirring. Okay, so I talked about the amount of sugar that we use. We use 7 cups of sugar. If you want to do a product with less sugar, you want to make sure that you buy the pectin that's designed for a low sugar product. So you can buy this at the grocery store, your discount market, anywhere that sells canning products, you can find the low sugar pectin. So that's an option if you want to cut back on some of the sugar. So, and like I said, I added the margarine to prevent the foaming. So when this comes back up to a full rolling boil that we can't stir down, what we're going to do is we're going to time this for a minute. So I did add pectin. Now, pectin is a naturally occurring product in fruit, like strawberries, apples, any type of fruit. You'll find pectin, and that is helps it gel. So we add the pectin to the strawberries just to give it that added security that our jam is going to have a good gel. So that's why we added the pectin. There are recipes that you can prepare with strawberries that you don't add pectin. You can just cook your strawberries down. Now, that's fine. But if you want to have a secure, in your product, you want to make sure that it is going to gel, you can use the pectin recipe. It works really well too. Okay, so it's starting to come up to a boil. And you see that the sugar starts to dissolve, and it really has a nice bright red strawberry jam color. Can you guys see that? Okay, great. So just keep stirring this. And now when we finish the cooking process, what we're going to do is we're going to put the strawberries jam into jars, and we're going to use our canner here to actually process them. So you want to process them for about 10 minutes, but because we're at a higher elevation, we're going to process them a little bit longer. And we'll talk about that when we get to that point too. Okay. Okay, so we've got our strawberries going. Now, I talked about pectin a second ago. Now, you can find pectin in the canning section of most stores that sell canning goods. You can find it boxed in powder form, and this recipe uses a powder form. You can find liquid pectin. They have recipes that will side with that, or you can buy pectin in a jar that you can just pull out the amount that you need for the product that you're making. So these are some of the forms of pectin. So our strawberries have come up to a boil, and we're going to boil this for about 1 minute. So I set my timer here, and it started. So we're going to start my timer. Okay, so we've got my timer going, and we're going to just kind of stir this for a minute. And once that minute is up, we're going to take it quickly off of the heat. So we just want to make sure that we kind of continue to stir and just kind of watch it for about a minute. Okay. So while we're waiting for this to finish boiling, what I thought we'd talk a little bit about are some of the utensils that you're going to need to have when you are canning the strawberry jam. One of the things that's really essential that we are going to use is the jar lifter. So that comes in handy. So you can use the jar lifter. And also we're going to use a funnel because we don't want the metal clinking to the sides of the jars. Now our jars are in our canner here warming up. So we're keeping our jars nice and warm. Okay, so that's a minute. We're going to turn this off. And we're going to remove the strawberry jam from the burner. Make sure I get my oven mitts on. There's another item that you need when you're canning. Make sure you have good oven mitts. Thank you, Nicole. Okay. Okay, so we have our jams all done, and you see we have a little bit of foam. I'm going to use this metal spoon to just kind of pull off some of the foam. And we're just going to go around and skim this off. Now, foam is safe to eat. Matter of fact, when I make strawberry jam at home, my family loves the foam. They like to make sure they have ice cream ready to try the foam. So you can do that. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just, we want a nice clear jar of jam. So we take as much of the foam off as we can. So we've taken a little bit of the foam off here. I'm going to keep going just for a second, but it gives you an idea of what you need to do to clear up your jam. So we put a little bit of margarine in it, kind of keeps it from foaming up. And we're going to take off the little bit of foam that is there. Okay, great. So we've got a lot of the foam removed. See, this is great for ice cream. So make sure you have some ready to go before you start your jam. Or you can just put it on crackers or just have it there. So now we have our jam. It's pretty clear. Now let's talk about the canning process. So a lot of people want to just finish their jam up at this point, but put it in a jar. But what we're going to do is we're going to process it because that's going to give us a safer product. So we have our jars here heating in our canner. Now we have a canner here, but if you have a large stock pot that you can put like a cake rack, a round cake rack at the bottom, you just want to make sure that you're keeping your jars away from the bottom of the pot. Thank you. Okay, so just make sure that you have a canner that you can go ahead and process your strawberries. So I'm going to pull the jar out with my jar lifter, we're letting out the extra water that's in there. And we're going to come over to our jar of strawberries, and we're going to start our pot of strawberries, and we're going to start ladling them into the jars. Now, a ladle is another key piece of equipment that's important to have when you're making your jam or when you're making any type of canned product. So I'm going to just ladle our jam right into the hot jar. So we got hot jam going into a hot jar. And we're going to leave about a 1/4-inch headspace. So headspace is that the distance between the top of the jam and the rim of the jar. So we have a little handy dandy, if I can find it, headspace measure. Oh, right there in front of me. Okay, so we've got so this is perfect. We've got just at 1/4-inch headspace there in that jar. Now, after you do that, you want to take a damp paper towel and just wipe off any little bit of jam that could have collected on your jar rim. Now I have lids. Your lids you can use just one time. It's only use your lids one time, but you can use the rings several times. Once they get rusty or start to, get dented or anything like that, then you let them go. But you can use the rings several times, but the lids only once. So we're going to turn until we get that first piece of resistance, and then we're going to give just a little bit more of a turn because you don't want to make it really super tight because then the processing won't pull out the air that's in the jar. So we're going to put that back into the jar, into the canner, that jar back into the canner. And then we're going to pull out another jar. Should have several jars of jam from this recipe. Okay, so let's keep going. Okay, so we just want to make sure that we just kind of evenly get the jam distributed through the jars. And now, in the past with the lids, we used to tell people to get those nice and hot. But now we find that I've got a little bit too much in here, so we're going to take a little bit out. That the compound has been updated on the lids, so you don't have to get those hot and boiling anymore. So what I did with my lids to prepare them, I just washed them and rinsed them off good, and now they're ready to go. Okay, let's make sure I have enough in here. Oh, I took a little bit too much out. One of the things that I want you to note is that when I went in to take some of the extra jam out of the jar, I used a silicone or rubber plastic spoon to do that. Don't use a metal spoon because you don't want to nick your jar. So, okay, so that's perfect. Got right at a 1/4-inch there for headspace. We're going to wipe it off, and we're going to put the lid on. And know that this is a compound on the lid that helps the lid adhere to the jar. So once it's used once, you can't use that lid again because that compound gets worn. Okay, so we're going to put that one back in. I'm just going to keep going, just keep adding, pulling the jars from the canner and adding the jam to the jars. Okay. And then put a little bit more. Some really great smelling. I know you folks in the audience can smell that jam. There's nothing better than strawberry, the smell of homemade strawberry jam. Okay, we're going to put just a little bit more. And I think we've got dripping here. And again, you can tell that I've done this before. I'm really good at eyeballing that. I don't want to jinx myself, but that's one of my superpowers as a canner. And really figure out how to get that 1/4-inch headspace in there. And just remember when you're at home doing this recipe, that take that headspace seriously. You want to make sure that you look at your recipe and determine how much headspace you need for your recipe, because it makes a difference. Some recipes will call, well, some products that you can will call for a larger headspace. With jams and jellies, we only process them for about 10 to 15 minutes. So you don't need a lot of headspace. Some products, if you're going to can, like maybe in a pressure canner, you're going to need more headspace. So really look at the recipe, make sure you understand how much headspace you're going to need, because the whole point is to pull that air out of the jar. And if you have too much headspace, you may end up with too much air in your jar. So let's remember to always check your headspace. I've been doing this for years and years, and I still check my headspace every time I do a batch of jam. Okay, so we got one more to go into the pot here, into our canner. Okay. And we have one more jar here. I'm going to kind of grab out. Now, you'll see that we have some half pint jars and we have some little jelly jars here that we're going to use. So it's fine to do a few little smaller jars. Just don't go a lot bigger. You want to make sure you adhere to the jar size that your recipe recommends. Okay. We've got 4 of the pint in 2 of these little jars that we're going to process today. Okay, so we got that one. I'm going to put that one back into our canner, and we're going to pull out the last jar. What's that? Okay. And this is our last jar. Now, remember I said that, it's really important that you process your jams, once you get your product into the jar, you want to keep going and do the last step, and that's the process. Let's rinse this one off really quickly. Okay. Oh, wow. I have way too much jam in that little jar. We're going to take some out. Okay. Okay, I'm going to test to make sure we got the good headspace. I'm going to wipe this one off. And we're going to put our lid and ring on. Got a little bit of jelly here, and get it into the canner. Okay. So now I'm going to focus a little bit on the canner. Remember, if you have a canner with a rack, that's perfect. It's great. If you don't have a canner with a rack, it still works. You can just use the stock pot that you put a rack in the bottom of. You want to make sure that you process your jams and jellies for at least 10 minutes. Now here in State College, we are a little bit higher altitude. So we're going to process these for 15 minutes. We're going to add an extra 5 minutes to the process. Now, once you finish the processing of the jars, you don't want it to come to a strong boil. You just want a nice, steady rolling boil. And you're going to start your timer for 10 minutes. And once that 10 minutes is off, you're going to turn off the heat, move the canner from the heat, remove the heat source, and then you're going to open up the canner for 10 minutes, time that. Once that 10 minutes is up, you're going to pull your jars up out of the canner one at a time. Now you're going to have a little bit of water on the top. Don't be tempted to tilt it to remove that water, because you could disturb the canning process, the sealing process, or the gelling process with your jam. So once you do that, then you should be just about done. So thank you so much for coming out today.